You know that feeling, right? You make a perfect, detailed plan, and then, boom, one little thing changes, and the whole thing just falls apart. Well, it turns out there's a much smarter way to plan. It's an AI technique called partial order planning, and it's a total game changer because it builds plans that are as flexible as the real world.
I mean, it happens to every single one of us. You map out this beautiful step-by-step sequence, but the real world is messy. One small hiccup, one unexpected delay, and the entire plan can come crashing down. This isn't just a human problem, by the way. It's a massive challenge for AI and robotics. So how do you even begin to build plans for a world that just doesn't follow a straight line?
Okay, so here's our game plan for this explainer. First, we're going to dive into exactly why those rigid plans are so fragile. Then, we'll introduce a much more flexible approach and peek under the hood to see how it works. We'll put it head-to-head with the old-school methods, and finally, we'll look at where this kind of smart planning is already making a huge difference out in the wild.
All right, let's kick things off with the villain of our story, the traditional, super inflexible plan. Now, on the surface, it seems totally logical, right? A, then B, then C. But it has a fatal flaw that makes it incredibly fragile when it meets reality.
The real problem here is something called early commitment. A traditional planner decides the entire order of every single action right from the get-go. So if step 3 suddenly becomes impossible, or hey, maybe a better way to do step 4 pops up, the plan doesn't just bend, it breaks. You either have to scrap it or backtrack, wasting a ton of time and energy. So, if rigid plans are the problem, what's the solution? Well, this is where our hero enters the scene. Partial order planning, or POP for short. It's a method designed from the ground up to fix this exact weakness.
And this right here is the key idea. POP is a master of procrastination in the best possible way. It avoids locking in the order of actions until it absolutely has to. So instead of creating one single fixed path, it builds this beautiful, flexible web of possibilities.
So how does it pull this off? Well, first, it figures out all the tasks you need to do to reach your goal. But here's the really clever part. It only creates an order when one task truly depends on another. You know, you have to crack the eggs before you can scramble them. But if two tasks are independent, POP just leaves them unordered. And that simple idea is what unlocks the ability to do things in parallel.
Now, I know this might sound a little abstract, so let's bring it down to earth with a simple, everyday goal that we can all relate to: making and eating breakfast.
Okay, here's one perfectly good way to get it done. You grab a plate, you make your tea, you toast some bread, and then you sit down and eat. It's a totally linear, step-by-step plan. And it works.
But hang on a second. This is also a perfectly valid plan. See what happened? We just toasted the bread before making the tea. POP is smart enough to recognize that making tea and toasting bread are independent. They don't rely on each other. The only real dependency is that you have to do both of them and have a plate before you can finally eat. And that, right there, is the magic of POP.
Okay, so we've seen what POP does, which is pretty cool. But now let's dig into how it actually does it. Let's pop the hood and take a look at the engine that drives all this flexible planning.
Everything in this world starts with actions. These are the basic building blocks of any plan. You can think of them like Lego bricks. Each action has two sides. Its preconditions, that's what needs to be true before you can do it, and its effects, that's what becomes true after you're done. Next up, we've got causal links. These are basically the glue that holds the plan together. A causal link is just a connection that says, hey, we're doing action A specifically because it sets up the thing we need for action B. For instance, the action get a plate makes it possible to do the action put food on the plate. That's a causal link. It's the why behind the order. But sometimes, plans can have conflicts. In POP, we call this a threat. A threat is any other action that could accidentally mess up a condition you need. Imagine you have a causal link. Make toast leads to have toast. A threat would be an action like, the dog eats the toast. POP is designed to spot these potential conflicts and figure out a way to resolve them. So the whole process really just works in a loop. POP starts with the end goal, figures out what's missing, adds an action to fill that gap, and then links it all up. It only adds an ordering rule when it's absolutely forced to. And most importantly, it's constantly on the lookout for those threats to make sure one part of the plan doesn't sabotage another. It just keeps doing this over and over until the plan is complete, correct, and flexible.
Now that we've seen the nuts and bolts of how POP works, let's put it right next to the old school method. You'll really see the difference when they're side by side.
And yeah, the difference is pretty stark, isn't it? With POP, the action order stays flexible. You have minimal commitment, and doing things in parallel is just naturally part of the deal.
All of that means way less backtracking and much higher adaptability. Meanwhile, traditional planning is fixed, it commits way too early, and it's super rigid. And that's exactly what makes it so fragile in complex, real-world situations.
So this all sounds great in theory, but where does it actually show up in the real world? Let's take a look at where POP is being used and also talk honestly about its trade-offs.
Trust me, POP is not just some academic idea. It's being used to help robots plan their movements, to manage complex business workflows, and to coordinate whole systems of multiple AIs working together. It's even used to create smarter, more believable AI characters in video games. Basically, anywhere you need a plan that's smart and can adapt on the fly, POP is an incredibly valuable tool.
So, if we're going to sum up the benefits, what are they? You get incredible flexibility in how you order your actions, you get natural support for doing multiple things at once, you end up with fewer, silly, unnecessary rules, and at the end of the day, you get more robust and adaptable plans that can actually handle the beautiful messiness of reality.
But hey, let's be real. No solution is perfect. All of this amazing flexibility, it does come at a price. Managing all these possibilities takes more computational horsepower, and it's definitely more complex to program than a simple linear planner. If you have a problem with a truly massive number of possible actions, it can start to slow down. It's really a trade-off between raw speed and smart adaptability.
And that brings us to one last thought. We've seen how AI gets a huge advantage from focusing only on what truly must happen in a certain order and leaving everything else flexible. So the question I want to leave you with is this. How could we apply that same principle of minimal commitment to our own lives, our own projects, and our own goals to make ourselves more resilient, more creative, and maybe just a little more effective?